Welcome to a Comfort Zone retrospective on Kismet Radio in partnership with These Days. We're your hosts, Tara and Pedro, and we're broadcasting from south-facing windows. This July, Saba celebrated the 10th anniversary of his cult classic, Comfort Zone, an ambitious 14-track project that ultimately defined his musical journey. To celebrate the occasion, These Days and Kismet published an oral history of the tape, which saw Pedro speak to 17 contributors and friends who were around during the creation of Comfort Zone. We thought it would be cool for our collab to also include an audio piece, so here we are with a Comfort Zone retrospective, a limited series where we unpack all 14 tracks on the tape, welcome some special guests, and generally nerd out on music. If you didn't listen to our first episode, it's out now. Pedro and I discuss the oral history and break down our favorite songs and lyrics and discuss Comfort Zone's legacy. How are you doing, Pedro?
I'm doing good. I'm excited.
Yeah, you should be excited. I just asked you if you were excited and you laughed, so I
you
take
put
that
me on
as
the spot.
affirmation.
You put me on the spot. How did you feel after the first episode?
I felt good. You know, we were finding our rhythm.
Yeah.
But I feel like we balance each other out well. So, you know, I think it's going well.
Yeah, building that chemistry as we go.
Yes, indeed. Okay, first up is the opening track for Comfort Zone. This is Time Zone.
All the kids I graduated with, waiting for my major hit. Disregard my shows until I main event. Till I stadium, I'ma stay burnt. Staying in, fuck, I'ma go out. Go, fuck if you ain't bout shows. I just pop the pill, feeling disappear. Feeling like the motherfucking golden. I'ma pop a little game like I'm game. Ain't no vibe till it's dry. I'm alive and I know it make it bleed. If I wrote it, I know it.
I've been on Adderall too long, cause it's feeling like the same day. Hourglass, sandal pass, that look like the same thing.
Okay, so in the last episode, you categorized Time Zone as your best slow burn. So I think that now is the time to unpack that further, honestly.
Yeah, I think I kind of spoke to this last time, but it just, in my head, I guess, I had a different version of what the intro was going to be.
What do you mean?
I think Time Zone is a way better intro for new listeners of Saba, whereas like people that had been following before, and this might just be my perception, like a Burnout would have been something that played more to
But
the
that's
themes.
so obvious, I think.
I know, that's why.
Yeah.
That's why.
Damn, Pedro going for the obvious.
I'm man enough to admit that I was at fault, because honestly, the song has grown a lot since then on me, and I think like as we dive into it, we'll talk about all these different really cool things that he was doing with this song that at the time, you know, sometimes, like you said, like fans can be really obtuse about what they want out of an artist, and I think that was what was happening to me at the moment.
You can't blame yourself too much.
Thanks.
This was 10 years ago. Your music taste and understanding of the world has evolved.
The relationship with artists and stuff, for sure, like, and your expectations of art.
Yeah.
And then also when we were doing the oral history, like there was a couple of people that were just mentioning how much that song, when they first played it around other people, like they had the most positive reactions to it. So like on a track list form, it also made a lot of sense from that perspective, you know? I wasn't around those moments, so I get behind the scenes why that makes sense more.
Are you talking about like when Saba was asking his friends their opinions? Or?
Yeah, I think there was first like a couple of release parties that he did where like they were playing some of that, or like listening sessions, as well as he mentioned he went to California and he had previewed that song to some people out there, and they were like, "Oh, this has to be the intro because it's so fire." So yeah. Do you want to dive into some of the themes for this record?
Yeah, I'll let you take it away.
Okay. So as kind of like a thesis statement for the whole project, it definitely speaks to him embracing his purpose and like being more confident in himself and his career. Definitely speaks to him not wanting to be quiet anymore. That's the big theme, I think, in that record. There's a little sub-theme that's really funny to me regarding Adderall and Adderall usage. I feel like Saba has, one of the cool things about Saba is that you can, if you follow his career, you can trace like different personal developments in his life in different like eras and things that he's thinking about that time. And I think Adderall was definitely like something as a college student, you know, trying to manage a music career on the side. He was definitely, you know, in need of some Adderall. And I don't know how much you listen to Get Comfortable, but there's a song in there called Adderall, which is basically him talking about.
I've heard it, but not to the same degree.
Yeah. It's, I was revisiting just because of this song. Like I don't go back to Get Comfortable as much as I think I should. But it was really funny he has a whole song about him using Adderall and sleeping maybe 7 hours in a whole week. And I'm like, that can't be.
And also Red Bull.
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, well, then he's like, Red Bull's not doing it for me anymore. And then Time Stone, he's like, this feels like Adderall is wearing off and it's not working on me. So, you see that again, like his real life and how he's doing stuff and at a young age, So it's really funny. For you, were any other themes or kind of like connections to the themes that you could recognize on that record?
I think it's just like that general theme of time. And kind of just like, I think it's interesting, like Saba's just saying, I'm on my own time. And like as a young person, I don't remember ever feeling like that. Maybe not thinking about it, but also not being, it just never felt like time was really mine in the same way. Like, it took him, wasn't it like 4 years between Get Comfortable and ComfortZone, or it was a while?
Well, 2 years, I think, but he had been working on ComfortZone for a while.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know, I just never really had this concept of like time being mine and like thinking about, now as I'm older, it's like, it always feels like, oh, there's not enough time. But when I was younger, you don't really think about time that way, even though it's also fucking made up.
Yeah. That's a really good point, because that's something that I've always been impressed about him, that he's been really, maybe not patient, but like responsible with his time and saying like, I'd rather dedicate enough time to my art so it's where I want it to be, rather when people try to rush stuff. And I think that's even like to this day, people are asking him to drop that collab with No ID already. It's like, I know that he's just trying to like make the best piece of art that he knows he can make, and he's not rushing it, which is really cool and like very mature of him too.
Yeah, I feel like Saba's always been an old soul, so I don't know. I think like it's also interesting. He was 10 years ago. He was 20 when he put this out. I think like that concept of time is like something you always grapple with, like your whole life. So even like now, as I'm thinking about it 10 years after it came out, and like what I thought about it then and what I think about it now, it's just like, my view on time and like the things that I want to do in that time has changed so much. So, I think it's like, I don't know, for him to be like, that's how I feel now about my life. I'm on my own time. But like I finally feel that way. But so for him to feel that way 10 years ago, 10 plus years ago, when he wrote it, is like, that's crazy. Yeah,
and it's a really cool songwriting element that he does in this song too. Like he starts the first chorus asking these questions around like, who do you want to be like? Who do you picture you as? And he's asking himself that. And then there's ad-libs that just kind of repeat those questions at the beginning. At the end of the song, when he's doing the chorus again, the ad-libs change to like him being more like with conviction, saying like, oh, it's gonna be my time, or I'm gonna do.
Like he's starting to believe himself.
Yeah, it's like never gonna fail. I'm gonna be rich by the end of the year. He's making these like proclamations, which is really cool. Seeing what we're talking about like in song form and how he kind of like makes that happen, little subtle ways, as well as like the big picture of the record, which is really sick. Yeah.
Did you want to talk about some of the musical elements?
Yeah, let's dig into some of the musical elements. Is there anything from the oral history that grabbed your attention?
I think it's just that idea of like, it's the time, the era in music in Chicago is like drill music. And so, like you said, like you expect Burnout or Butter to be like the opening song because it has like that neo-soul jazzy sort of vibe that we know Saba does well and that like a lot of people from Chicago do well. But for him to like open with something with more of like a harder beat, I think, like he said himself, like he was trying to make a song of the time or kind of encapsulate that moment, but in his own way.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool, like a little bit of background on this record. He met this trio, like a production trio that was named at the time Naima. It was composed of Ken Ross, Day Day, and Corey Grinberg, who went by, or still goes by Let Mode. and there were these guys who were going to school to Northwestern for music. And they got kind of put on by Saba's like former band member, Jameson Brenner. I think he's still a really good friend of Saba's, and like they were just coming from a show. He played some music from that trio, and Saba was like, these guys are making the music that I'm kind of like envisioning for myself, but I'm not able to do it yet. So that's how they got together, and it was towards the end of the making of the album of ComfortZone. So it must have been
one of
like
the last songs they made.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It must have been like early 2014 or something, where Ken Ross and Naima have production credit, I believe, in 3 songs in that album, and those are like the ones that came towards the end of the making of the project. And it's really cool that Time Stone was one of the last ones. I think, you know, probably because they were just really excited about that new music. He put it as the intro. But Saba really underlines the fact that what really drew him to them was like they were making music that he couldn't yet, I guess, make himself, but like he wanted to make it. He could see it.
But then he took that and elevated it, which is cool.
Yeah, and so the second really cool story out of that collaboration was that when they first met, Ken Ross gave him some of these like instrumental and songs, including Time Stone. And so I was like, I really like this. Can I take it home and just change the drums? He had a different idea for the drums, and Ken Ross was like, sure. And
No, but he was kind of like, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't just like, oh yeah, for sure, I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah.
He was like, I mean, like, what are you gonna send back? It can't be any better than what I had. Low key, I'm sorry. Like,
Well, I think it was just like, you know, Ken Ross, I don't think he saw the vision yet. But then he talked about like he was so impressed that the next day, Saba sent it with like all the reference with like the drums and I think a little bit of the melody and like the rapping that he was trying to make. And he was like, how did this kid do it in a day? And like they all got back together, like him, Day Day, and Lemon, and they were just like, wow, this kid.
So he had only written the chorus but hadn't written the verses?
I think he had written like at least like, you know how sometimes rappers will do the flow before they put the lyrics. I think he had a little bit of that in the chorus.
So it's basically just like the beat, like he added to the beat and he added the chorus.
And he added the drums, he swapped the drums.
Okay, and then he sent it back.
Yeah, and so like the chords are like these like lush thin synths with, you know, these really cool chord progressions. I think also Saba is a big Pharrell fan and like an NERD fan, and
well, the drums are crazy on that.
But then he added the drums, and the drums are more Chicago hip hop, like drill stuff. There's like these really cool hi-hats that are very subtle, but they're rolling kind of like, you know, like in drill, like they just go. But he does it in a really subtle way where they come and go, and it's a really, really interesting way to like mesh all those worlds together. And I was talking to John Cuevas, who was Saba's manager at the time, and he was speaking how like what made that record also make sense as an intro was that it had all the sounds that you were going to hear throughout the project kind of put into one record. So that also opened my eyes, you know, which was really cool.
I mean, the bass is crazy. You know, and like, I think that, you know, and then like in the oral history, Saba talks about how he was mumbling, and that was not because he was mumble rapping, but because he was in the basement, right? And his mom was there or some shit, it was late, whatever, but
when I did the interviews for the oral history, I talked to Big Wiz, who was a mentor of Saba's at the time, and he was telling me that Saba was doing the mumbling because, you know, he was trying to show how you could do that while still rapping raps. And then I brought that up to Saba, and Saba was saying basically that. He's like, no, it wasn't like, you know, a creative direction. It was more so like my mom was sleeping upstairs. I couldn't make a lot of noise, which it's endearing also, you know, you don't get to hear so many of these like stories before people like get big or are able to do this on like professional studios, like what the real hustle and what the real sacrifices and how art can sometimes come from all those things, you know. So cool and very endearing.
Like creative choices in the end sometimes are out of necessity and out of you know, but I think that song is also cool because the drums and the bass go crazy, and then at the end we get this like really smooth saxophone that is like a really great transition into Burnout.
Yeah, that's Carolyn Davis, who's a friend of Ken Ross, and Ken Ross was like emphatic about the fact that she's probably one of the best like sax players in the world. She also I believe she came out of that Northwestern team.
Oh.
So like just having somebody like that be able to play that
Yeah.
outro, and to me, we spoke to this a little bit in the last episode, but there's a lot of sounds reminiscent of like Sunday morning or Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah.
And this kind of feels like that too, you know, like in that Hey Arnold sphere when like, I don't know, there's a transition from one scene to the next, I can hear that saxophone kind of playing.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's like a youthfulness here. Like he talks about really grown up subjects, but there's, you know, there's still that youthfulness. There's still that, I mean, it's a coming of age project, right? So with the first track, Saba's really like telling us, showing us who we are, that he's different, that he's not like other kids his age, or he's never been into the same shit like other kids his age are into.
Yeah.
So I think like, I don't know, I think he just does a really good job of like, I mean, being believable, you know, like I feel like young people often talk about sometimes, or not often, but sometimes talk about things that like are outside of their purview, or like I'm just like, why would you be talking about that? I don't believe that you know anything about that. But it's like he kind of like toes the line between like having to be like being a kid, but also like having to grow up because of like the circumstances of being in Chicago and like his life and where he lives and like, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's part like, you know, he's introverted, but he's also very much introspective.
Yeah.
And you can see it again in like his songs, like he's constantly questioning himself and like who he is as a person and stuff, while also having to manifest himself as like the greatest rapper, you know, because if you're gonna be a rapper, you have to have that mentality. So he's balancing those things, and he does a really good job of you know, showing you the person, but also that he can really rap.
Yeah. Well, how do you think Time Zone sets up for the rest of the album, and why is this the first song?
Yeah, I think like for some of the things that we just mentioned, like the sounds that you hear here are present throughout the record. He's also speaking to like, you know, he used to be really quiet and he's like coming out of that, as well as he's at that point in his life where people are still not showing up to his shows because they're not like big enough shows, you know? But he knows he's gonna make it, and also he's like, I'm not even gonna be as concerned about those people as maybe he used to in the past. So he's really setting up this like, this way of like getting out of that comfort zone.
Yeah.
So it's really cool.
Yeah. In the oral history, Jake Caves was, I mean, he said, he's saying real stuff about his future, our future, you know? And it's like, he is living in the present of like, kind of like the things he needs to accomplish in a way to set up his future in a certain way, you know? But what do you think Saba's saying about the future?
I think, I think I've heard him talk about this, like he needs to manifest these things for them to happen. Like he got to a point where he like, it's not enough for me to like work hard and be passionate about stuff. It's like, I need to be out there manifesting and making it a reality.
I mean, putting that shit on wax is the best form of manifestation.
So I think that's really how he sets that up.
Yeah. I think anything else?
Yeah, I think that's Time Zone.
Yeah, I think so. Well, next up is Burnout.
Hey universe, don't come at me with your bullshit. Your nonsense, your issues, can't handle it. These problems keep me up at night. But in the end, they're just problems and everybody got somebody. Shut up, don't nobody wanna hear that. Shut up, don't nobody wanna hear that. I'm out of here and burned out, blow windows down and roll out.
Crashing cars like burnout. I got burned out, so I dropped out.
Okay, do you want to start with the themes?
Yeah, let's talk about the themes for Burnout. I think at this point also in Saba's career, I think he was being really literal with the titles.
Yes.
So Burnout is about him just feeling burned out. His sophomore year in college, I think at this point, and he was ready to drop out or had done it already. He also had like real life shit going on, and just being a teen in Chicago, you know, trying to maneuver that and trying to make a rap career out of it. I can see why somebody would be burnt out. And that's the big theme, I think.
I think the other theme is that shit never ends, but you know, it's like a life burnout anyway.
Yeah. Well, speaking of how I feel like a lot of his songs in my head, they're kind of like relatives. Like you can see some songs later on in his catalog be kind of like cousins to this. There's a couple songs in Few Good Things where I'm like, he's speaking about burnout, or thinking about like how as an adult he takes responsibilities and all these things that come into his way without the stress of being burnt out, but also being reminiscing of like, oh, back in 2012 things were like easier, like, you know, like, or not easier, but like he was happier.
Yeah.
So it's funny how like he, in this stage, he's like, I'm burnt out, and then as an adult, he's like, you know what, those were the good times.
Yeah, because I mean, your responsibilities change.
Yes.
But it's also interesting that like the themes have stayed constant throughout his life, and he's just like, as he gets older, obviously, he, you know, I mean, he has better coping mechanisms and stuff to deal with certain things, but
yeah, I think that's
know?
exactly right. Like what I'm trying to say with the Few Good Things, he's talking about it and not burnout. It's like, I'm so burnt out. Like he's very stressed
it's like,
out.
I don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah. As an adult and Few Good Things, he's more like, there's all these things happening and I just know that I need to like maneuver this way or the other.
Yeah.
And he's able to speak about his stresses and what's happening without like that sense of like, oh, I'm a teen, without losing my mind around these things, you know?
Well, I think that like, I think that's interesting because he kind of deals with that stress by like driving, kind of, you know, like this, like kind of like an escape from his problems, and like probably the only way you could escape as a teenager in general, and probably in Chicago, you know, like you have a car, hopefully, and you just drive around, because what the fuck else are you gonna do, you know? Because like you're underage or whatever, but you know, I mean, I just feel like because he can't cope with the stress, like what he doesn't know how, you know?
And you mentioned in the last episode, like vehicles and transportation being a big theme across. I think it's a big theme in burnout. There's a couple of times, right, where he's referencing either running to try to catch the bus or running home because he couldn't catch the bus on time and it stopped running. What was the other one?
I mean, Aaron says it on the chorus, pull the windows down and roll out. And then he mentions that video game Burnout. It was literally called Burnout, right?
Yes. When he released the music video, which a lot of it is him and Aaron in a little stop motion car. It was premiered by Complex, and in that interview, he talked about how the title is named after, you know, the feeling of being burnt out, but also one of his favorite video games, which is Burnt Out, which is really funny.
I mean, I just feel like they use, well, that's definitely my favorite theme throughout the project is like the car, the transportation, like that sort of movement. Because like I can imagine Saba like moving throughout the city, you know, whatever it is. And like, when I moved here, I didn't have a car, and then I got one later. And I just like, when you have a car, you have autonomy, you know, like you can move around on your own, you know? And I mean, I just think like as a kid growing up here, it was important for you to be able to do that essentially, you know? Like in general, but like even here, like the car, you know, the car just like comes up in his, even on Bucket List Project, the car keeps coming up. You know, so it's just really interesting. I feel like it gives the project movement in a way, in like a different way. And it's just like very Chicago to me in that way.
And one thing you just said that also for me is a big topic in this song, a lot of what artists were doing in that like open mic era of like painting a picture of what Chicago is or was at that time in a very like poetic way, but like it really situates you in the city. And this song, like there's a big example of him like saying that he's on the south side.
I know exactly. I was gonna say that. I was like, he's literally on the south side. He's locked out in Inglewood, and like,
and then he has to go to the west side. Like it really tells the story. If you've never been to Chicago, like you get a sense like, oh, the south side and the west side, they're two completely like spaces in people's minds, which is true. You know, there's like a whole different culture and everything.
Yeah, and it's like, well, so when I listened to this for the first time, I didn't live here.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know. I mean, you know, you could think South Side and West Side, okay, that sounds like, I mean, different sides of the city. What, I
Yeah.
mean, what more of it could I have really thought? But when you live here, then you're like, oh, lower whacker, like all these kind of like really
Yeah.
Chicago-ass things.
All these
No.
nuances of what makes Chicago Chicago.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I mean, obviously from segregation and like the great migration of people going to the
redlining and
West.
shit
Yeah,
like
it's
that,
like,
yeah.
it's really made Chicago a bunch of little cities within this big city, which is very, very interesting and very unique, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and this was the line, I'm hella out west though, where the bus stopped running early. Like you mentioned, that was my run-up for most Chicago thing about this album. So, you know, I mean, you can't,
Yeah, that's also, again, like,
it's very nuanced.
nuance, and it hits on a layer of like, if you've never been to Chicago, you can get it. But if you're a kid from Chicago, you're like, wow, that's really my lived experience. Which
Yeah.
if there's a reason why Saba has so many hardcore fans, I think it's because he's able to connect with everybody, not just in Chicago, but like specifically kids from Chicago, like at such a core level, you know, with stories that they've seen and witnessed. So
Yeah, really able to capture like the essence of what it is to grow up here.
Yeah.
Regardless of like West Side, South Side, like, you know, just swap it, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe a South Side kid got stuck on the West Side, shit. Like,
yeah. It's really on a more humorous side. I think this happens with every artist catalog, especially if you have such a long tenure, but some of the lyrics can be really, really dated.
yeah.
And the one that stood out to me here was the reference to like cat stacks, like a cat stacks being on your backstage. That's only like, if you're around 2010, 2015, you have an idea of who she is, and like the
Yeah.
line makes a lot of sense. But I can't imagine somebody like a kid now being like, oh yeah, cat stacks.
I know on Genius, he did like an official whatever annotation.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, there be hella Tatianas, which is also
Another,
genius.
yeah, another.
Backstage, I'm like, that's funny as fuck. That comment was like 10 years old.
Yeah, and it's I'm grateful that I'm not a public persona, because again, Sam and I are the same age.
Yeah.
And he was posting that type of like annotations on Genius at the same time that I was posting random wild shit on Facebook, you know? And at least I could go back and delete my Facebook post from like 10 years ago when I was a
Yeah.
teenager. But now if fans want to go see what Saba was thinking at the moment, that's what they get, which is really funny.
Do you want to talk about some of the musical elements in this song?
Yeah, I think this is a very pop record for Saba. I think, again, throughout this album, he's really trying to push his boundaries, his sonic boundaries, and trying to make what an album would sound like if he had like all the resources. So he was just pushing himself, pushing the people around him. And through the Harold Washington Library program, U Media, he met this kid named Justin Jackson. And Justin's from the South Side and would often travel all the way to Saba's basement on the West Side or to the heart of the city studios to like just play around with the piano and see how we can help Saba. And one of the melodies that he kind of made was this this melody on Burnout, which is, again, very light, very youthful, very full of like hope, I think, which creates an interesting like contrast with the lyrics and the feelings of Burnout, because the song itself sounds very hopeful.
But yeah, I think there's like a glimmer of hope. Or he's searching for
Yes.
the hope, or he's trying to look past what he's dealing with to find the hope, you know, but it's not there yet.
And the instrumental helps with that like glimmer of hope.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he's talking about, you know, again, some heavy shit on this
I
song.
mean, but he says, wake up every day feeling good. You
That's
know,
towards the
chorus.
end, though.
Yeah. Oh, that is towards the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. You're
Yeah,
right.
with-
Oh, I see. So there's like again in the first song, where he's like trying to talk himself into something. He's trying to talk himself into, yeah.
Yeah, and this is another record, I think, where it's still very pop, but he doesn't lose like those, you know, hip hop elements, and there's like that clapping. There's a soulful,
Soulfulness,
the soulfulness aspect, and he met Aaron Allen Kane, and she made that song, and she's one of the most, I think, powerful voices that we have. Like,
Yeah, that was your. Is this the song that's your favorite?
yeah, yeah.
Guest feature.
Favorite song and favorite guest feature for
Oh,
sure.
wow.
She really, like,
Yeah.
even the songwriting, because she wrote the chorus, and just the way, it's so impressive to me that there's all these artists at that time, they're just up and comers, and they're trying to find themselves, like, the confidence of, like, I'm good at this, but you hear it, I'm like, this is,
There's raw talent. It's
yeah,
just
this
raw
is one of the
talent.
most amazing vocalists
Yeah.
that, you know, I think there's in our generation. There's a reason why Prince was, like, mentoring her towards the end of his life, which is really cool. But I also think that transition towards the end when he starts saying everything. What was it?
Wake up every day feeling.
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
At
Which
the
is
end
my
when he's
best line, my runner-up for best line. Because who don't? That's like such a. I don't know.
and I believe they kind of started playing with that on the live shows, but a
Yeah.
very genius move of having that transition into Butter, you know? So
Oh,
then
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that's when like you're going from that kind of like down feeling into like a feeling of exuberance and just feeling good. And
Wake up every day feeling good is like a mantra.
Yeah.
You know, it's like something you write on a fucking post-it and put on your
Yeah.
mirror, you know?
And I think it's very telling of, again, Salah being able to show a full comprehensive view of his world. There's going to be days where he's down and there's going to be days where he's feeling really good.
Yeah.
And the way that he's able to just play with that and like show us is something that an 18-year-old or 20-year-old shouldn't be able to do at this level, I guess, in my head.
I really agree. I don't think so. Definitely before his time.
Yeah. And
Sonically, mentally, like.
I think we've been talking about this, but I really love the hook. It sounds like a top 40 hook. But I actually have two fun trivia items about this song. The first one being that Saba and Aaron met before actually formally meeting as collaborators. They had a class together at Columbia. And I guess they just knew each other as, you know, classmates back then, something art related, but I don't know how much they knew of each other as artists, or like musicians. And it wasn't until they were introduced later on to start working together that they were like, oh, you were in my class. And so there's that fun connection of Columbia dropouts, you know?
They're both dropouts?
I believe so,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
Who isn't a Columbia dropout, you know?
I know some.
And then the second one is that for the music video, speaking of making creative decisions out of circumstances and coming with something really dope, the video was directed by Jay Caves for Heart of the City with help from Tom Bin and Elijah Alvarado. And at some point, the original footage was from just the apartment, you know, where Saba in the video is wearing a blue shirt.
They're like laying on the ground.
Yes, and
Yeah.
Aaron's wearing a blue flannel. That's, I think, like the original footage, and it had been lost in a hard drive. And so they were trying to figure out how to quickly be able to do something with what they did have. And they came up with this idea of like the stop motion, them in the car and moving around. And they ended up finding the footage, so they incorporated that into them like pulling up into a drive-in theater, and that's where you see the footage and stuff. And I really love that video,
Yeah, I do
especially,
too.
you know, the little animations and stuff. And
It's definitely different, you know, and like they definitely tried. You could very easily, I don't know what the original video looked like, but you know, so a lot of music videos are boring now.
Yeah. And also in a time where there was, I'm assuming, little to no budget, you know, to have to do something like that. And also, like, even technology wasn't where it's at now. Like, now kids can make the craziest edits.
Yeah.
Back then.
I could just ask AI to fucking do it. I don't need another human.
Yeah. And another smaller trivia from that bigger trivia, at the end of that video, it's like supposed to be a dream sequence, the whole video, and there's two kids playing with car toys. Those two kids actually reappear in the Pivot Gang Hero video.
Oh, Oh.
At the beginning of the video, they're going into this comic book store and they're buying the Pivot Gang comic. It's the same two kids that years before were playing with the cars.
Yeah.
So there's a
Easter eggs.
yeah, there's a Pivot
Yeah.
Gang multiverse out there going
Okay.
on.
Ooh, multiverse. I like that. Okay. Well, the last song for today is Butter.
Wake up every day feeling good. Wake up every day feeling good. Out of town, me showing love. For my new shit, for my niggas in the hood. Wake up every day feeling good. Wake up every day feeling good. Out of town, me showing love. For my new shit, for my niggas in the hood.
I got up out of bed this morning feeling
Do
like
you want to talk about the themes for Butter?
Yeah. On Burnout, like I mentioned before, there's like this glimmer of hope, and like Aaron and him are kind of like escaping in the car to like find a way to like kind of look past, like relax, look past their problems. So, you know, we get the line, wake up every day feeling good. And then on Butter, I feel like you finally, like Saba finally arrives at the good feeling, you know, like Butter is the aftermath of Burnout. Saba raps, I got out of bed this morning feeling like some butter. I mean, who doesn't want to get out of bed feeling like butter, you know, like life feels livable, shit is smooth, you know? So I think it's just like this, we're sort of like seeing, again, like I mentioned before, like we're seeing him like have this feeling and then like talk himself into this feeling, right? Like with Time Zone, you know, he's like, I'm on me time, you know, I'm about to be the GOAT, like all this shit. And he's saying kind of like tentatively, like talking himself into, in the end he feels it, you know, like in Burnout, like clearly he's burnt out, but he's like trying to see, you know, past whatever shit he's dealing with and like arrive at this good feeling. Like we get there, you know, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and when I talked to him for the oral history, he mentioned that it really is just like that wanted to feel good, and like the instrumental, the production made him feel that way. And it was one of the, not few songs, but he does this sporadically throughout his catalog where he's less focused on the lyrics and more on like that feeling and what the whole song can provoke.
Yeah.
And you know, the lyrics are fun. It's not something that you have to like go super granular about.
Yeah, you don't have to unpack it like that.
But it's what makes this record just, you know, you can play it in the morning and start off your day and immediately it'll be like a mood booster, which is really, really fun to do, especially in the summers. I've tried to do it in the winter. I'm a person, I don't know if you're the same way, but I'm a person the winters will get me really, really down. And no matter how much positive music I play, it will not.
Can't cut through.
But in the first day of spring, you know, play.
You're like, oh, I'm butter now.
Yeah.
But no, I feel like it's also maybe is almost like a literal coping mechanism too. Like he's using, I mean, obviously music is a tool of expression, but it's like he's using music to kind of like, I don't know, kind of like figure his life out, you know, like
And
as simple as that.
He also uses hair as like a vehicle for the song and expressing just feeling good, and tying it back to my brain thinking about these songs as relatives. Like he just dropped that song Head Wrap where it talks about his locks and like just growing out his hair, and you can kind of draw a line from like Butter and speaking about his hair back then to this point, which it's again one of the most rewarding things to be a Saba fan. You kind of see in like this progression of where he's thinking and seeing a song like Butter, which I really, really love, and then seeing him get to the point of the production at Head Wrap with no ID behind the boards, like that's super cool. And
Yeah, I mean, also hair holds so much energy, you know, and I know like Saba has cut off his locks before, you know, so I also think it's like some of that too. It's like when you cut your, like, you know, you're like shedding kind of, you know, and then, I mean, he grew it back, but like maybe the hair grows back healthier and stronger, you know, like it makes me think of that kind of stuff too.
And then Burnout was his first collaboration with Aaron Allen Kane. And Butter is, if not the first, one of the first collaborations with Jamila Woods. Like, and both have been like really long-standing partnerships with incredible songs. And similar to Saba meeting Justin Jackson at Jew Media, Saba met Jamila at Young Chicago Authors, in that open mic circle, and one day Saba just invited Jamila over to record in his basement, and she mentioned that she was struck by how, I guess like methodical. He
Not mythological. Just kidding.
I mean both maybe.
Hey,
you know?
listen. Saba lore is crazy.
Yeah, exactly. But like in like his intent in the records, and he was already thinking about like, I want you to sound this way, and all these artists that now we think are super established and they probably have worked in really big rooms with really big producers, like that was their first taste of something like that. And seeing that at that ground level, still making incredible records, it's just a testament of the talent that was there from the jump, you know, that they just kind of nurtured.
Again, raw talent. Such a young age, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I just really love Jamila's vocals, but also the way that she delivers stuff, because she comes from that like spoken poetry like background. It really is like hitting on two different layers, and to the point of Saba manifesting a lot of things. I feel like the song, to your point, is like about manifesting feeling good. And you know, if people are not aligned with that, like who cares? Like it's one of the most not one of the most, but it's another song that proves the fact that Saba had this big vision for the record, and he was able to execute across the project.
Yeah. I really identify with like there are things about Saba that I identify with, because I am definitely an overthinker, and I'm like very introspective, like can be an introvert, you know. So like those are the kind of things that, you know, just like fully watching himself kind of like think about all this stuff, unpack it, you know, and try to then also like having haters, having whatever, I don't know. It's just like, even now I still relate to that shit. Yeah. Some of that shit is just the same throughout your whole life. It doesn't matter what age you are, you know?
And in terms of musical elements, something that was interesting to me, Saba mentioned during the oral history that he was really into like the chopped and screw sounds. And it's present in Butter, but it's also present in Time Zone. And I think he's kind of departed from that. So that's also another like little time capsule of who Saba was and what he was listening to at the time, which it's cool to see like those connections now across the record.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's like, it's really cool that he takes all of these sorts of elements from other musical styles and makes it his own, because you don't really think about Jamila Woods and like a chopped and screwed sound going together, you know? So he really like takes all these elements and makes it his own. Drill, chopped and screwed.
Neo soul.
Yeah. And then blends it together like seamlessly, you know? And like, you could see he's building this world, you know? So.
Yeah, on top of being a great rapper, he has a great ear as a producer too, and a vision for what he wants the sound world to feel and look like. And sound. Yeah.
And the way he collaborates with people is also really cool. You know, I mean, even that like Ken Ross story, you know, it's just really cool to see like how he's building community and how he's working with these producers and impressing them. But like just like taking what is theirs and like building on top of it, and just like how collaborative like everything on this project is.
Yeah. This was another song that in the oral history we talk about, but he dropped his hard drive and lost most of the files. This was a song that was one of the ones that got lost. And people really love this version that came out. I've also heard from folks that the original, he just had delivered it in such a way that they wish that like at least his form of delivering the verse would have stayed. But
like a different flow?
Yeah, not a flow, but you know, like sometimes you say things with a little bit more like a little bit more enthusiasm. And I think he was in, I mean, to me, who didn't hear the original version, like, this sounds great, but it did leave me wondering, like, how did he elevate that, you know, which is.
But he said it came out better the second time.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think Saba really liked that, but there was definitely a couple other people that were like, you know, that the original version of Butter was really, really dope. Yeah.
I wonder if Jamila was on that, like they had the.
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah. Damn, so maybe she should do her feature over again too.
Yeah, the lore continues to grow.
Yes, the lore does continue. So anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you all for tuning in to the second episode of A Comfort Zone Retrospective with Kismet Radio and These Days. On the next episode, we'll be tackling the next two songs on Comfort Zone, Welcome Home and 401k. Till then.